Hi, I'm DuEwa Frazier, and you're listening to Nerdacity podcast. Today, my guest is author Michelle Coles. She is a debut novelist, experienced civil rights attorney, and mother of four. As a ninth-generation Louisianan, she is highly attuned to the struggles that African Americans have faced in overcoming the legacy of slavery and the periods of government-sanctioned discrimination that followed. Michelle is a proud alumna of Howard University School of Law and the University of Virginia. Her goal in writing is to empower young people by educating them about history and giving them the tools to shape their own destiny. Michelle Coles lives in Maryland with her family. Stay tuned and listen to this wonderful interview with Michelle about her new book, Black Was the Ink. Thanks for listening. Greetings, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much. A pleasure to have you on Nerdacity podcast, especially with this being Black History Month. So thank you so much, Michelle Coles, for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And so I want to start off by congratulating you on your beautiful book for teen readers, Black Was the Ink.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, if I could do the hurrah, hand clap, sound bite, that's what we would have right here. And I love the cover, not only just the image of the young man, your protagonist, Malcolm, but just the colors and the different, like we see the Capitol in the background, or is that the Capitol or Congress? Okay.
It is the Capitol, and I have to shout out my illustrator, Justin Johnson. He is an incredible artist, and he's also a local DC public school teacher. And as I'm sure you've seen, he also did several pieces of interior art that are beautiful. And the protagonist, Malcolm, he's an artist himself, and so that's one of the ways that he processes what he learns, through his travels and experiences. And so Justin was able to bring to life Malcolm's vision and art in the book as well.
Totally. And that was something that that was definitely on my list to ask you about, the beautiful sketches that are in the book, knowing that your protagonist, Malcolm, is would that be called a sketch artist or an illustrator?
Yeah, okay. I would say he's a
Awesome. And so now going back, we started getting into your book, and it's so amazing as I was reading your bio, Michelle, that you have so many interesting facets to you as a professional and a creative. You're not only a novelist, you're also a civil rights attorney, and you are an alumna of Howard University. Shout out to the Bisons, as well as to University of Virginia.
Yes.
Yes. So, tell me, how does a civil rights attorney segue into the world of imagination and creativity and fiction and writing for young readers?
Well, in certain respects, it was a very bumpy, challenging transition. And then in other ways, it wasn't as difficult as you would imagine. I actually had never really written anything in the fiction space before starting writing this manuscript. And so I started writing the manuscript in summer of 2015. And I'm sure we'll go into, what my motivations were then. But up until that point, I had been a civil rights attorney, and as an attorney, you do a lot of writing. And so that's kind of the one piece that was very similar, is I wasn't as intimidated by the idea of writing a book because I knew I spent all my days writing anyway. It was just writing, nonfiction in a more structured format, relying on cases as sources. And when I decided I wanted to write this historical fiction novel, my sources changed, But a big part of being a lawyer is being able to tell a story and also being able to understand people and understand, their motivations and their experiences and being able to communicate that. And so there were a lot of skills that translated from being a civil rights attorney to being an author. The bumpier parts, I would say, is I'd never met an author before I started writing my book. And so
Whoa.
yeah, I'd never, at least not a fiction author. Like I had, law professors that published legal books, but I'd never met a fiction author. I didn't know, I just didn't know the ropes. I didn't know. I had to Google to find out you needed an agent. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know the first step of how to get started. And so that was really, I would say, one of the hardest, most intimidating parts was just kind of figuring out how to make this happen largely on my own.
Wow. Well, because I am a writer and I am not agented. I started out self-publishing, and I've done some, writing for, I sold a children's story some years ago on my own without an agent. But it is very difficult. And so I take my hat to you, because some of us have been at it for a long time and still trying to, figure some of these aspects out. So I think that it's really great with you being a diverse author and having a debut novel and breaking into this industry that has been, it's been said to be a challenge at times for, authors, writers, creators of color. So I take my hat off to you for your diligence and for getting past, whatever barriers might have existed.
Thank you. Thank you. It was definitely, it was definitely challenging. And I remember when I got my first rejection letter from an agent I had queried, and, I just had to hold my head up and say, you know what, that means I'm an artist now, because I'd never, being in the legal field, it's not a creative space. And so it's less, subjective, how work is evaluated. And so, so I took that like little thing of pain and rejection.
You took it on the chin, Michelle, and you kept going.
And I was like, I'm an artist now. I got a rejection. Let's go. Let's
go.
This
Let's do this.
Yeah. And when I signed, my book was published by Two Books, which is an imprint of Lee and Low Books, which is a large multicultural children's book publishing.
Oh yes, I'm quite familiar. Is Stacy Whitman your publisher?
Yeah.
Yes, I know Stacy. Yes.
Oh, how wonderful!
Okay.
Yes. So
awesome.
yes. So when I signed with them, I had won the second the honor award for their New Visions Award.
Oh yes,
yes, which is a contest they do for unpublished, and I want to say it's also unagented.
Unagented, probably,
yes, unpublished, unagented authors of color, and I was like, that's me all day,
all the way around.
Yes. And so I was so glad when I heard about that contest and entered in, and was so grateful when they selected my book as the honor winner. And so it wasn't until a couple months before Black Was the Ink came out, and it came out this last November, that I ended up signing with an agent. And so I'm really excited to be working with Charlotte Sheedy, who represents so many amazing authors like Mahogany Brown and Jacqueline Woodson and so many others. And so so that was like a real highlight on my journey.
Oh, that's awesome, Michelle. And this is encouragement for emerging writers, and especially, children's, young adult authors who are just starting out as you once were, and who feel, a bit discouraged. But just know, if you keep pushing and you keep, crafting your work and the commitment, you will be met with, those opportunities. So you are totally an inspiring example of that.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I have to say this to myself all the time. I have to say it to my kids all the time. Winners never quit, quitters never win. Probably
I love that.
Yeah.
Come on, kids. Winners never quit and quitters never win. I mean, it's simple, but it's true.
It's simple, but it's true. It's simple, but it's true. And you're going to hopefully you don't get a lot of no's before you get to the yes. But, if you don't stop, you stay persistent, you stay determined. That's the only way I got to a place where I have a published book. And so, yeah, I think that's very important to remember is it's not necessarily an easy, smooth path, but if you, stay at it, eventually it'll happen.
That's awesome. And so, Michelle, just kind of going back, if you can walk me through, you started the book in 2015, and then now it's 2022, and the book was released in 2021. Is that correct?
Yeah, in November of 2021.
Awesome. And so, a question that I love to ask all of my guests, especially during this time as creatives have certainly been impacted by the pandemic, just like anyone else. And so I'd like to ask you, were you working on Black Was the Ink at all during the pandemic, or any other writings? And what was that like for you creating during a time of uncertainty and even, during the times that we were on lockdown and things like that?
Yeah. So I started writing it in 2015, and I got I think I found out, or that I signed with Lee and Low, for them to publish the book. I think that was in 2019. So that was still a year out from the pandemic. And I want to say when the pandemic started was when I was in a really heavy editing stage with my editor. And so I was pretty kind of boxed in already, and like eating, sleeping, and drinking my book and of my book, going back and forth.
Sure.
The biggest adjustment was that my kids, and I have 4 kids, my kids were all home from school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was, and I work full time. I still work full time as an attorney. And so
wow.
it was juggling, it was juggling a lot. Thankfully, everyone in my family was healthy and safe. And so I didn't have that added stress, which I can only imagine, how difficult that would be if you were juggling, health issues on top of everything else that you had going on.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But with everything going virtual, given my situation with having several young kids and still currently working outside of being an author, the virtual the move towards virtual events was really helpful for me.
Yeah.
I was able to go to bookstores virtually, not physically.
Exactly.
In far off place. I was in Miami on Tuesday with Bethany Morrow.
Oh, wow.
Virtually.
Was that the Miami Book Fair or something like that?
No, it was Books and Books Miami at their bookstore.
Oh, okay.
So, I was at a bookstore there, and I did where else did I did a bookstore, Parnassus Books in Tennessee. I did a taping in Boston. I was able to just be in so many different places that my life wouldn't have really been conducive to.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, I think it ended up being helpful.
Sort of like a in disguise, would you say, almost?
Yeah. I mean, I would still wouldn't trade the pandemic for that. But
right.
Yes, but making lemonade out of lemons,
exactly.
I think it worked out okay.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear. And I've heard of similar experiences where authors have told me, well, hey, being on lockdown, that's more time on task. Being able to really sit down and commit, because you just, you can't go anywhere, or at least, as you mentioned, many of us were working virtually anyway. So your job was at home, your writing was at home, you got everything around you that you need. And so, it kind of, I think, with creatives, we just tend to adjust anyway.
Right.
And so it sounds like that definitely, was a plus in some regards for you.
Right. Yeah, I got to lose the time I was wasting in a commute, just have like more focused, time. Yeah.
Sure. And so now going back, I feel like there's so much we can talk about, Michelle, but going back into your book, can we talk about your inspiration and also how amazing it is for you writing a teen male boy protagonist in a time when in the last decade, I can say, even when I was a K-12 teacher, except for Walter Dean Myers and, some of the books by Jacqueline Woodson, there were not a whole lot of books geared toward boys or with the boy protagonists
Yeah.
that kids could pick up in terms of boys of color, Black boys.
Right.
And so I wanted to ask you about that. How do you feel now being part of really a very small percentage of YA and young readers, authors who are crafting those protagonists because there's such a need
Right.
for it?
Yeah. I mean, I feel overjoyed to be in that club. I'm a mom of 4 boys. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah. And so really like my whole existence as an author, I owe to them. Like I said, I didn't do any fiction writing until 2015. And what inspired me to write this book was the Mother Emanuel massacre.
Mm,
And I was on maternity leave with my second son at the time, and was horrified by the events that took place.
mm-hmm.
And I felt like I needed a way to explain the world to my son
For
in a
sure.
in a way that he could understand. And so Black Was the Ink is a story that takes a present day African American teenage boy from DC, and he goes to stay with relatives on a family farm in the summer. And while he's there, he discovers the diary of an ancestor who worked as a legislative aide to some of the first Black members of Congress. And this ancestor ends up taking Malcolm, the present day main character, on a time travel journey to the Reconstruction era so that Malcolm can see what the experiences were like for Black people as we were
Mm-hmm.
coming out of enslavement, and what the promise of American citizenship was supposed to mean, and then
Wow.
how that promise ended up falling short. And so I really wanted to take my knowledge and experiences as a civil rights attorney, and I wanted to take like this research I was doing and all of the current events that were happening that that Black people were going up against injustices on a day-to-day basis. And I wanted to try to weave all of those threads together in a way that I could hand something to my kids and they could say, I understand what's happening and I understand what role I need to play, and like how I can't, how I can be empowered and not a victim of the system.
Wonderful. And what I want to say too, I love how you started out. See, sometimes I think we can idealize situations. Like, yes, Malcolm started out, he explains that he was playing basketball, I think it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
and with one of his friends, and a hail of bullets rang out, and he was not involved. However, the police really kind of, caught him and his friend up in it, and he was arrested. And I feel like that is a story that we've often heard. I can definitely think about, male friends I've had that have said,
Right.
they were from the East Coast, maybe they were from New York or somewhere, and there was something that went on, and then they were sent down south.
Mm.
Something went on. Not
Something happened.
something, but something went on
Right.
surrounding them. And
Yeah.
what do? We send our boys, and even at times our girls, down south, almost like a protective, or at least getting them out of Dodge, or
Right.
giving them, what is
Yeah.
it, the fresh air fun type experience.
Right.
And so, what was that like to craft that? Do you know youth who have had to leave home wherever they're from, whether the East Coast or the North, to go down south and spend a time with family, whether they wanted to do that or not?
Well, I mean, so I guess the first kind of story, and this person didn't go south, he went west, but the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air
Oh, right.
right, is also a similar type of setup at the beginning. So I'm from the South.
Oh,
I'm
uh-huh.
from Louisiana, and I grew up in Texas, but I'm originally from South Louisiana, and
Are you a relative of Beyonce, Michelle? Just go ahead and tell us.
maybe distant, maybe distant.
Distant cousin.
I'll claim her if she'll claim me. No, I'm just like,
Right.
we all cousins.
Yes.
Um, yes, but growing up in the South, I was very closely connected with all of my first cousins and with my parents' siblings. And my parents, we left South Louisiana when I was in elementary school, and we were one of the first people in our family to have left. And so both of my grandparents were still there. Most of my aunts and uncles were still there. All of my first cousins were still there. And I remember feeling that separation from home very acutely. And it was like a piece of me broke with that, with that move. And then I would still come back down there in the summers and spend weeks at a time and be able to reconnect and feel my community that I was, used to being surrounded by. But I also noticed that there were cousins who are more like second cousins whose parents had left in a previous generation. And that connection to home wasn't exactly the same. And we didn't know them the same. It was like, oh, those are those cousins in California. Don't really know their names.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I could see that disconnect, but still wanted them to feel that sense of home with where their people are from. And so that's kind of how I see my children, because they were born on the East Coast, and so they may go what I consider home. They may go home to Louisiana, but it's not going to be home for them in the same way. But there's still so much love there for them. And so I guess I was thinking more about like trying to create that connection for my boys with the place that I think of as home.
Sure. And I can certainly see, I really appreciated how the relationships and Malcolm has his great aunt. There are a lot of young kids, youth, who no longer have grandparents or great uncles, great aunts. I know when I was growing up, I did have that. And I still consider those people to be, upon whose shoulders that I stand, my great uncles and aunts. So I love how you crafted that family, and that, talking about grandmother and visiting the grave sites of the family, and just the whole, like, his father's brother coming home after, being away for so long. And it's like he's getting reconnected with his family. And then at the same time, he's like being connected to history. And that's what I found really amazing about your story.
Thank you. Thank you. My great grandmother, I was very close with her, and she lived to be 102.
Wow.
I was 15 when she passed. And
oh my goodness, that is wonderful. Wow.
Yeah. And
with her.
Exactly. To have that time with her. And so she was born in 1893.
What?
And
no.
Yes. And because I was, I was almost an adult at the time that she passed, and we had such a close connection. I just felt like, it just closes sort of the time gap when you look at it in terms of people and generations and not years, And so one of the things I think about is, my great grandmother was born in 1893. Me and her were like best friends. And if I share her stories with my kids, even though they're born in the 2010s, they have a connection to her and to that period.
Wow.
And so I think it's so important to like pass down those relationships and those familial bonds and those stories. And thank God my grandmother is still alive today, and she's 94.
Whoa.
And my kids adore her. And she just came to visit me in the fall. My kids
She came to visit you as in travel?
She did. My mom brought her.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Yes. She's alive wire. She's a live wire. So she came and had a ball, and had a wonderful time. And so yes, and I had a lot of people in my family actually lived into their 90s, like old uncles and old aunts. And so when I was growing up in Louisiana, it was just a lot of people I was close with as a child were in their 90s.
Wow.
And
so you got all of that wisdom, and whatever they had to offer, you were, absorbing it.
Soaking it up, loving it, loved it. So I wanted Malcolm to have some of that richness and love and experience.
Wow. And, let me ask you, had you thought ever about, and I know this doesn't matter, but I just wonder, would the story have worked if Malcolm a Marva, or if it was a female protagonist?
protagonist. So, and it could potentially work. So Malcolm, as I mentioned, he time travels to the Reconstruction era, and he literally walks in the shoes of his ancestor. And,
Mm-hmm.
because women,
Cedric, right?
yes, his ancestor,
Cedric.
Cedric.
Yes.
Yes, his
Mm-hmm.
ancestor. And Cedric is fictitious, but
Yes.
all of the people that Cedric interacts with, or most, like 99% of all the people Cedric interacts with that Malcolm interacts with as Cedric in the past were all real. So he's working with, the first Black members of Congress, like Senator Hiram Revels, who
Mm-hmm.
actually had his swearing in anniversary yesterday, his
Wow.
152nd swearing in as the first Black member of Congress.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was yesterday, and he meets Robert Smalls, who's a great civil
Oh yeah, I
war
remember
hero.
that name, Robert Smalls.
Yeah, great Civil
It,
War hero that
in
became
in one of the, because my parents used to buy me the golden, what is it, the Black History comic books.
Oh yes,
And
he had
I
one.
believe he was.
Yes, yeah.
Was
From
he
stealing
that you
the plant.
remember?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He had a comic book. Yes, from
Uh-huh.
stealing the Confederate artillery ship, the
Mm-hmm.
Planter. So Malcolm's meeting, all these people as Cedric, but. So in terms of if Malcolm was a female character, he would still have to be a male character in the past to be in those rooms, in those spaces,
Yeah.
because unfortunately in the 1870s, even as the world was opening up to Black people, it was not yet opening up to women.
There you go.
Right.
Yep.
So that would have been another hurdle. So that's why, partly why he was written as a male character. Another reason why is I wanted my children to see themselves in the story,
Yes.
and so that was really important to me. I wanted
True.
it to be something that they like gravitated to.
And again, as we were, Michelle, your book fully fulfills a need and a gap. When we talk about we need diverse books on so many levels.
Yeah.
In terms of the protagonists that are offered, and not, we know that middle school, the statistics show that that's where we kind of lose some of our male students,
Right.
in terms of reading and things like that, unless it's graphic or comic or, blowing up buildings or things like that. They're not always interested. So, we have to have these diverse stories that boys can be interested in, as well as, girls.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten some really favorable responses from teen boy readers where, some of them have told me it's their new favorite book, or they just
wow.
Yeah, so that's been really, really exciting. But I do remember one of the agents that I queried, and I remember he responded, and the question he asked me is like, "Who's your audience for this?" As if there wasn't one.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Some of them are not. Yeah, they'll say that to you because if it's not particular to their world, then they don't know who the audience is.
Right. And I definitely responded like, I want African American teens to be able to learn their history and it be accessible to them, but not just African American teens.
Exactly.
I also want all Americans to know this part of our history that's been overlooked and covered up and distorted in so many different ways.
Right.
This is a fundamental American story that most people just don't know.
So true.
And I just want to point out one other thing about the cover. When we started talking, you mentioned the color. Did you notice the color scheme?
Okay, so it's now I'm thinking about it being red, white, and blue. Was that on purpose?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, girl. Y'all really did it, honey. Y'all put in the freedom and the liberties, y'all. Yes. The color of democracy.
Yes, it is. It is. Because, Reconstruction was really the first time that America, gave more than lip service to this democratic experiment of, people, regardless of race, are entitled to vote and are entitled to be a part of the government and, have a say in how things are run. And it didn't last very long, but, it was the first time that our democratic ideals didn't ring completely hollow.
Wow, true indeed. And not too, as you're talking about history, how awesome this would be for any K-12 teacher, or, facilitator at a library to really, on the themes of history, American history, be able to engage youth with this subject matter. And it's, it's not only language arts focus, but it's
Mhm.
history and social
Yeah.
studies focus.
Yeah.
So teachers could totally have a ball with this and, connect it to the standards. And um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
2 points on that. One, there is a teacher's guide that goes with the book. It's on Lee and Lowe's website, and it's phenomenal. So if you Google Black Was the Ink Teacher's Guide, it comes up, and it has so many different, discussion questions and activities and prompts, and it's a really good teacher's guide. And then I also just wanted to point out the Zen Ed Project. They just released a report in January about how state education standards fail to teach the truth about the Reconstruction era. And
Wow.
yeah. And so this book was like super timely for
Mm-hmm.
that, because it really does give a nice, history of from the beginning of, when African Americans were emancipated from slavery and obtained citizenship rights, through the Jim Crow era, where those rights weren't respected at all. And then through Malcolm, understanding the challenges that African Americans still continue to face today. And then in the back of the book, there's back matter that includes a timeline of relevant events that
Mm-hmm.
are covered in the book, and also many biographies of many of the real life historical figures that are introduced in the book. So just some additional helpful materials I wanted to point out.
Wow. And that is so amazing. I
Thank you.
really think that's so needed. And this is, this is the future of our books. This is where, I mean, in my opinion, where our books need to be headed. And your book really features, you have the visuals with the sketches, and that meets well with, students and young readers who are visual, visual learners, and they love to see something
Yes.
while they're reading. Um, the diary entries, I loved how that was like set apart from the narrative of the book. So it really did look like, okay, he really is finding, these diaries from, the 18, whatever the years
Right.
those were, because the print is offset. It's different from what Malcolm would normally see.
Right. Yes. Yeah, it is very visual. And even the ink spots that make up the chapter number.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that was a nice touch the publishing company did.
And so the book title, does it have a double meaning? Like black was the ink, like the ink he used to
Yeah.
create with his sketches, as well as the diary entries?
Yes, as well.
Okay.
Yes, both of those meanings. It might even have a quadruple meaning. It definitely covers both of those meanings. The sketches he was doing, the
Mm-hmm.
diary that Cedric was writing in the past, but also just how the democratic values of our country were really written to respond to the um, the rights of Black people as we were
Mm.
out of enslavement. And so the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that were passed in the Reconstruction years, that's what really turned our country into the democracy it is today. The 14th Amendment, which gives people citizenship rights because you're born here or naturalized here. That was not guaranteed before. And so when you look at what is America today, and you think of how multicultural and diverse and how anyone can be an American, and all of those things that really make our country great and unique, that
Mm-hmm.
came about because of the need to address the rights of the 4.4 million African Americans who were emancipated from slavery, and making sure that they had full citizenship rights. And so much about what's foundational, about America really does come back to black people.
Mm. Mm. Love that. Wow. So it has so many meanings.
Yes.
And I love the biographies, as you mentioned, these wonderful photographs with these statesmen. Meet the statesmen in the book. This really gives readers a real history lesson, and how, each one of these men should have, their own children's book, some kind of book or a historical series with, featuring them. That would be
one of the things, I mean, I was just absolutely blown away and impressed by these men as I read about them. But about half, so there were 16 Black men that served in Congress in the 1870s. Two of them were United States senators, and the rest were in the House of Representatives. And about half of them had been born into slavery.
in
About
slavery.
half, half
Yep,
of them
I'm
had been,
not surprised.
right? And the other half were born as free people of color, born to free people of color. But it just blew my mind that, someone who had been treated as property and dehumanized in so many ways would have the wherewithal and the strength and the abilities to stand in Congress as an equal.
Sure.
And when you read, one of my sources in writing the book were the congressional records that are held in the Library of Congress, and they're available online, so you don't even have to physically go there. And when you read the speeches and the debates that these congressmen were engaged in, it's just so inspirational.
Wow.
Yeah, that
genius. And this is just one proof that, it used to be that what the propaganda was that Blacks were intellectually inferior, were, all of those things. And this is more proof that was never and is not the case.
Absolutely. Exactly. It was such amazing proof of it, because here it was, you're talking about Black people only a few years removed from enslavement, when while they were enslaved, they were prohibited from learning how to read and write.
Sure.
And yet they could emerge from that experience and just hit the ground running, right? And so it was never a question of their capabilities. It was a question of their opportunities.
There you go.
Yeah.
Amazing. You need to be on like PBS. You need to be talking with Henry Louis Gates, Michelle. You need to be, giving the TED talk on all of this and all that. So we're going to speak it into existence, that those will be some of the next platforms that you'll be on.
Well, I do have an event. I don't know if you noticed, I have an event on Tuesday at the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Are you kidding? Oh my gosh.
So I am
I had not gone to that. I was, primarily just reading on your book. Yeah. Is that on your website?
It's on my social media. I need to add it.
Okay. I was looking on your website. Got you.
Yes, I do need to update it on my website.
Well, congratulations. That's very exciting.
It is I'm so excited.
Is this in person? Is it virtual?
It's virtual.
Oh, okay. Yes, please tell me, send me the link or what have you. Yeah, that's great.
I'll absolutely send it to you, but I'm very excited. It's called Using Fiction to Explore Reconstruction and Its Legacies. And so I'll be doing an event with an educator named Sarah Elwell, and the museum is going to be displaying items from the Reconstruction era that connect to the book. So I am so excited.
Oh, that is amazing. Yes. That's just wonderful, Michelle. And thanks for mentioning that on the podcast, because it means we have it recorded right here. And then you'll have that on your social media. So that's great. And then, of course, before we end, I want you to give all your social media and where we can fully connect with you and everything you're doing to promote Black Was the Ink.
Yes, absolutely. Do you want me to give that now?
Oh, no, we're going to do that at the end. Oh, no, we're still in the flow of talking, because let's see. I'm going to look through my cards here. Okay, so my next question, Michelle, and this is before you might consider reading an excerpt of your wonderful novel. Do you envision a sequel to Black Was the Ink, or, perhaps some kind of a series or further look into history from the eyes of a diverse protagonist?
I've gotten that question a lot, and the problem I have with doing that is where, without giving any spoilers, where the book leaves off is really with putting the charge in Malcolm's hands as to what he's going to do with this knowledge and information. And so I feel like I need the kids in this generation to write that next book for me.
Wow.
I want to know what they're going to do.
Because I'm like, is Malcolm going to end up going to Howard Law?
Right.
Will he be the next Black senator or congressman?
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. And
I mean, he's got the name. He's got the posters on the wall. He's being transported through time.
Yes.
He's being anointed, Michelle.
I know he is. I want to see the kids make that come to life. That's the sequel for me, is what the kids do with this book. I want them to tell me.
You want them to tell you what happens.
What happens next. Yes. But I am working on other books, and I see the focus of my writing career to be uplifting pieces of history that are overlooked and deal with African diaspora. And so I'm working on a book right now about the Haitian Revolution. And so I'm excited to shine some light.
Oh, that's wonderful. Are you going to, I mean, this is a joke, but not a joke, because, you know, many of us have probably said they need somebody to come back. I mean, please erect Toussaint Louverture. Yeah. Look at the things that have happened to Haiti are just, they're just terrible. Over the years in my lifetime, I mean, it's almost as if Haiti has never recovered from so many atrocities, from natural disaster, from political things. It's like,
right. It is, it's definitely been, hard hit, but it's a, resilient group of people, and they have such a beautiful origin story of being the first place in the world to really overthrow slavery themselves. And so I have, hope for them, and just want to help shine a positive light on some of their stories.
Sure. That's beautiful. And so, we will anxiously await that, Michelle. And I definitely support whatever works are coming after this wonderful work that you have now.
Thank you.
And so can you select an excerpt to read for us?
Yes, okay. I will. And just to set it up a little, so this is after Malcolm has traveled to the past for the first time, and he's come back to the present, because throughout the story he's going from the past to the present. And so he's back in the present, and he's trying to make sense of what he's seen, and who he's starting to learn about, his ancestor. So this is the beginning of chapter 11.
Okay, great.
Malcolm was exhausted. As he aimed the water hose at the cooler to rinse off the soap he'd been using to clean it, all he could think of was what he'd seen and read the previous night. His drawing sitting on the nightstand that morning proved that whatever was going on wasn't just something he dreamed. Malcolm tried to process the surging sea of questions swirling in his mind. Who was Cedric? What did he want? Why was this diary in the attic? Did anyone know it was there? He knew this house had been in his family a long time. The desk certainly looked old, and the diary was caked in dust. But he had a hard time believing that he had discovered something that had been hidden for well over a century. Malcolm still didn't think he should tell anyone about his visions, but there had to be a way he could figure out what was happening to him. Maybe Aunt Carol could shed some light on the family history. He finished up with the coolers, propping them open and upside down to dry, and went inside. He found Aunt Carol in the kitchen, a room she never seemed to leave, washing dishes. "Hey, Aunt Carol, how's it going?" "Boy, don't you see I'm busy? What you want? There's some fresh squeezed orange juice in the fridge. Pour yourself a glass and then get," she said. Malcolm chuckled, wondering how in the same breath she managed to be hospitable while also telling him to get the hell out. "I'm sorry, Aunt Carol. I didn't mean to bother you. I was just wondering if you have a sec. I wanted to learn more about our family and, where we came from." Aunt Carol responded smartly without turning from the sink. "Well, we started out in Africa, then a boat came along, picked us up for an all-expense-paid one-way trip to hell, dropped us off in Mississippi, and that's where we've been ever since. That about answer your question?" Thanks, Aunt Carol. I knew that part. I was wondering more about what our family has been doing since we got to Mississippi. How long have we had this house?" Aunt Carol sighed at Malcolm's persistence. She wiped her hands on her bright floral apron and turned halfway toward Malcolm. "We've had this house a really long time. I'm not quite sure how long.
But I know I was born here and my mama Lucille was born here. Maybe her mama before that. I didn't know my grandparents. They died before I was born. Why you got all these questions? What are you trying to say? The house needs fixing? I know it could use some work. Why don't you make yourself useful and put a fresh coat of paint in the upstairs bedroom? Asking me all these doggone questions, you must have too much time on your hands. I got more than coolers that need cleaning. You know what they say, an idle mind is the devil's playground. Now stop pestering me and get before I tell Uncle Leroy you're free. She grabbed another handful of dishes from the counter and submerged them in the sudsy water.
I love that. And you know, he doesn't want to, what is it? Pitch hay, pitch a bale of, what was
Yeah,
that with Uncle
picture,
Leroy? He
yeah,
was fit
picture
to be
bill.
tied when Uncle Leroy asked him to help him.
Exactly, exactly. He knew better. He said he better get going before he
Right.
gets
He's
put
a
to
city
real work.
boy. And I like how, you know, it shows, you know, he's from the city and now he's seeing, you know, how they do things in the South. He's quite inquisitive.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that also I kind of take from my background because my mom's family was from the quote unquote city, the Baton Rouge city proper, and my
Mm-hmm.
dad's family was from the country. And so
Mm.
my grandfather lived on a farm, and my dad grew up on a farm. And so whenever I'd go visit my dad's parents, there were goats and horses and cows and chickens. And so I'm a little bit of a city girl. I'm a little bit of a
A
country
little
girl.
bit of a country girl too. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's nice that you can infuse that background and those details here, because you know what that looks like and what
Yeah.
it, you know, for a young person to encounter that.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, just going from, I remember, being in their house in the hot summer months, and sometimes I don't think they had any central heat.
AC?
Yes.
Yes, honey.
And you're just
I
trying to get
know.
up, get up under the window and like, can I get a breeze?
And I know you were like, because we do that, you know, with our older family that live in, you know, boy, how do they live like this, you
Right.
know, because
Right.
we're so used to certain things, you know.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
so he's getting a real education in more ways than one.
Absolutely. And he grows
Yeah.
to appreciate it too, and the freedom that is in that space when you're on your own land and you can make your own rules. And so
Mm-hmm.
he gets an appreciation for the land.
And so, Michelle, other than your museum event that's coming up this week, what else are you excited about and looking forward to?
Yes, I'm really excited about an event I'm doing on May 27th, being planned by a bookstore called Second Star to the Right. And it's going to be with Kimberly Johnson, who wrote This Is My America. And it's also going to be with Kimberly Jones, who wrote I'm Not Dying with You Tonight, and her recent book, How Can We Win? And I think we're going to have just a really interesting, fascinating conversation, since all of our books are really in the social justice space, dealing with Black liberty and equality. And so I think that's going to be a really fascinating conversation. I'm also doing an event with my undergrad for their Black Alumni Weekend with the University of Virginia. And so it's going to feature a couple of UVA authors, and that includes Margot Shetterly, who wrote Hidden Figures, and also Taylor Harris, debut author whose book This Boy We Made just came out in January. And then I mentioned the Books and Books event I did last Tuesday with Bethany Morrow, where we focused on her book and my book, but her book, So Many Beginnings, which is set in the Civil War Reconstruction era as well. And it's a remix of Little Women, the classic story Little Women. And so yeah, I have a lot of events coming up that I'm excited about, that I'm doing with other authors, and then various other book club events. I'm doing one with Well Read, a local chapter of Well Read Black Girls, and another one with Melanated Girls Read. And I'm supposed to be at a Texas Library Association conference in April. So just lots and lots of stuff.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It sounds like you're heading into a wonderful, productive, and really busy book promo season, book tour, if you will, in the spring. And so that's really exciting.
Thank you.
And so, Michelle, can you go ahead and give us your social media and where you'd like for us to continue to follow you and find out about your upcoming happenings, books, and events and things of that nature.
Yes. So my website is michellecoles.com. So please sign up for the newsletter. And then my social media, my Instagram is Michelle Coles Author. And that's MICHELLECOLES Author. And my Twitter is Michelle J. Coles Author. Did I get that right? I think I got that right. Yes. And so, so those are probably the two best places to find me. I just recently signed up for TikTok, but I can't make any promises that anything will happen there.
I know people are always like, oh my God, here's another one. Here's another platform that I've got to, use. So, but no, I'm sure you will, just as you have mastered all the other platforms, I'm sure you will figure out, how to get your literary TikTok on.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me on Nerdacity podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you about your debut novel, Black Was the Ink. And I wish you all the success that you can stand for your new book and heading into your future as a writer and children's young adult author.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking with you and hope to stay in touch.
Oh, we certainly will. And I will be in touch. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye now. And you just finished listening to episode 38 of Nerdacity Podcast with DuEwa Frazier, featuring my guest, debut novelist Michelle Coles. Please visit her website at michellecoles.com to find out more about her latest sensational teen novel, Black Was the Ink. Michelle will be speaking as a part of a BAW virtual event, Black Alumni Authors Roundtable with UVA on March 8th, 2020. I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast. Please follow Nerdacity on Instagram at Nerdacity Podcast. Also, tweet me about this episode and other episodes on Twitter at NerdacityPod1. As always, feel free to support the podcast with a small donation by sending to anchor.fm/DuEwa Frazier or paypal.me/DuEwa World. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.